A cold wind sweeps across the Atlantic. It is early 1942, the world is burning. In the darkness off the American East Coast, a submarine silhouette breaks the waves. Its crew listens in silence as the diesel engines rumble beneath them. Above, the night sky glows faintly, the glow of a nation that still believes the war is far away. Through the periscope, lights shimmer along the Carolina shore. Cars, buildings, towns that sleep in peace. America's war has barely begun. Then a torpedo launches. A tanker erupts into flame, fire rolling across the black water. Panic rises on the coastline. Newspapers will call this moment America's second Pearl Harbor. But to Adolf Hitler, this is only the beginning. In Berlin, he imagines more. More U-boats. More fire on America's doorstep. Maybe even German boots on American soil. How close did that nightmare come to reality? Because for a brief and terrifying moment, Nazi Germany looked across the ocean and believed the United States could fall. And the answer to how close begins with how Hitler planned to reach the New World. When the Second World War erupted in September 1939, the United States chose isolation. The memory of World War I still haunted the nation. American parents did not want their sons dying on foreign soil again. Congress passed neutrality acts. The public demanded distance. Germany saw opportunity. Across Europe, Hitler's armies moved with ruthless speed. Poland fell in weeks, Denmark and Norway soon after. In May 1940, the Low Countries collapsed. France, the world's once mighty power, surrendered within 6 weeks. Millions now lived under the Reich's expanding banner. Adolf Hitler believed destiny was on his side. Every victory boosted his confidence. Every collapse of another democracy fed his belief that America, isolated and unprepared, could be beaten if necessary. Germany had a doctrine, blitzkrieg, fast, overwhelming shock warfare, a doctrine powered by factories, innovation, and a leadership convinced of its own invincibility. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United States was still waking from the Great Depression. Its army ranked 17th in the world, behind Portugal. Its fleet was strong, but spread wide across 2 oceans. Its air force was small and outdated. Despite warnings from Britain, many Americans still said, "This is Europe's war, not ours." But the ocean that once separated worlds was shrinking. Technological advances, aircraft range, submarine endurance, radio communications, meant the Atlantic was no longer an impenetrable shield. The war would eventually test American shores. Hitler had studied world maps long before he rose to power. He envied America's resources, factories, and untapped manpower. But he also saw a rival civilization, one that stood in the way of total German domination. In 1940, after France's fall, Hitler expected Britain to surrender quickly. He imagined a world where the British Empire, under German influence or control, would allow Nazi forces access to global naval networks. If the Royal Navy ever flew the swastika, the Atlantic would become a German highway. Hitler also thought the United States lacked the will to fight. He believed America was a mongrel nation, weakened by democracy, capitalism, and what he saw as racial diversity. He convinced himself that if Germany struck hard enough, economically or militarily, the US would fracture from within. For him, crushing America was not just strategy. It was ideology. And in Berlin, his planners began to consider how. The German Navy, the Kriegsmarine, had been underestimated after World War I, but under Admiral Karl Dönitz, a new weapon was rising, the U-boat. Small crews, silent engines, and torpedoes capable of ripping ships apart. Germany had few capital ships, but these submarines were the sharks of the Atlantic. To Dönitz, defeating America wasn't about landing troops first. It was about choking the life out of the United States. Cut off its oil, sink its fuel tankers, prevent its armies and supplies from reaching Europe. If America starved, Hitler would never have to risk an invasion. This strategy soon collided with another event, one that would bring America fully into the war. Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. Japan attacked. The US declared war on Japan. Hitler, bound by his pact with Tokyo and driven by ambition, declared war on the United States 4 days later. It was the most consequential decision of his rule. The moment Hitler chose war with America, planners in Berlin faced the unforgiving math of geography. The Atlantic Ocean stretched 3,000 miles wide. To invade, Germany would need tens of thousands of landing craft, months of supply chains, and total naval dominance. Germany had none of that. And yet, the Reich still tried to project power westward. Through spies, through U-boats, through long-range aircraft experiments, through dreams of Newfoundland and Greenland as stepping stones. From early 1942 to 1943, the U.S. East Coast became a hunting ground. Fires burned offshore, beaches glowed from burning ships. Civilians reported seeing submarines surface within sight of boardwalks. The American mainland no longer felt untouchable. Across Germany, newspapers declared, "The Atlantic is no longer a barrier." This belief, whether realistic or not, drove Hitler's confidence. Some of his admirals even drafted concepts for Operation Amerika, a distant but symbolic invasion plan. But dreams and reality were now on a collision course. Because as the Reich looked west, America was rapidly waking up and preparing to push back. And that awakening shifts us to the deeper forces shaping Germany's ambition. By the beginning of 1942, Germany's reach across the Atlantic was no longer theoretical. It was happening in real time. The campaign became known as Operation Paukenschlag, drumbeat. German U-boats crept along the eastern seaboard, hunting merchant ships silhouetted against brightly lit American cities. The United States had not yet enforced blackout regulations. Tankers burned like floating torches. Over 600 ships were sunk in American coastal waters in just 1 year. The price was horrific: oil slicks stretching for miles, debris washing ashore, bodies appearing on beaches where families once picnicked. For the first time since 1812, the U.S. homeland felt directly threatened. But submarines were only one part of the German dream of transatlantic power. Germany studied ways to strike North America from the air. Aircraft engineers explored what they called Amerika bomber projects. Messerschmitt Me 264, Junkers Ju 390, Focke-Wulf FW 300. Massive aircraft designed to fly to New York City and back. The vision: bombs falling on Wall Street, Manhattan in flames, American morale shattered. One German pilot later recalled testing the Ju 390 prototype over the ocean. "We could see the curvature of the Earth." America no longer seemed so far. But every design stumbled against the same truth. Germany lacked the engines, fuel capacity, and production scale to sustain such missions. A single symbolic strike might terrify, but it wouldn't defeat a nation of 130 million with one of the world's largest industrial bases. Hitler also eyed the North Atlantic stepping stones: Greenland, Iceland, and Newfoundland. Control of those islands could allow Germany bombers and ships to launch operations against Canada and the US. German weather stations were secretly established in the high Arctic, automated outposts transmitting climate data vital for submarine warfare. Small, hidden, a reminder that German footsteps reached closer to North America than Americans knew. If invasion was distant, infiltration was immediate. In 1942, Operation Pastorius began. 4 saboteurs landed by U-boat on Long Island, 4 more in Florida. They carried explosives, cash, and a mission: destroy American infrastructure, power plants, factories, railways. But the mission collapsed within weeks. Why? Because America, once indifferent, was now mobilizing with a fury. One of the saboteurs panicked. He confessed everything to the FBI. Hitler had miscalculated the American spirit. Factories in Detroit, Chicago, and Pittsburgh shifted into wartime production at a speed the world had never seen. In 1941, America produced 3,000 aircraft, 4,000 tanks. By 1943, 85,000 aircraft, 29,000 tanks. The U.S. Navy expanded into a Leviathan of the seas. Aircraft carriers rolled out one after another. Liberty ships, mass-produced cargo vessels, replaced losses faster than U-boats could sink them. The industrial giant had come alive. President Franklin D. Roosevelt told the nation, "We must be the great arsenal of democracy." Hitler underestimated what that meant. The Atlantic Ocean remained a brutal obstacle for any invader. Germany learned this the hard way while planning Operation Sea Lion, the never-executed invasion of Britain. If crossing 22 miles of the English Channel was nearly impossible during the Battle of Britain, crossing 3,000 miles to the US was fantasy without total naval supremacy. And Germany's navy was never built for global conquest. By 1942, battleship Bismarck was sunk. Graf Zeppelin aircraft carrier never entered service. U-boats, though deadly, were too small to escort an invasion fleet. Even Germany's most ambitious naval plan, Plan Z, required 10 years to complete. Hitler started a world war after building only a fraction of it. Hitler wanted the United States crushed. He believed American power threatened his vision of a world ruled by the Aryan race. He fantasized about splitting the country, encouraging racial conflict and dictatorship. But his military machine was already overextended. The Eastern Front consumed millions of soldiers. North Africa demanded supplies. Occupied Europe required constant policing. Britain still refused to fall. The farther Germany expanded, the thinner it became. Hitler's dream of dominance reached the shores of America through fear, but not force. Still, for that dream to survive, the Reich needed a strategy that could turn terror into victory. This leads us directly into the angles that defined how close, or how far, Germany truly was from stepping onto American soil. Adolf Hitler's worldview was shaped long before the war. In Mein Kampf, he warned that Germany must rise or be crushed by the Anglo-Saxon powers. America, in his mind, was not just another nation, it was Germany's future enemy. He watched Hollywood films, studied U.S. population growth, and envied its natural resources. America had what Germany lacked: space, land for expansion, oil, food, a vast economy. His advisors often cautioned restraint. Foreign Minister Ribbentrop urged caution before making the U.S. an enemy. Admiral Reeder told Hitler the Navy needed a decade before confronting a global superpower. But after France fell in 1940, Hitler's confidence soared. He saw the world collapsing under his banner. Why should America be different? Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels reinforced this vision. German newspapers mocked the soft Americans. Radio broadcasts boasted that German U-boats could bring the war to New York's doorstep. To Hitler and his loyalists, the war against the U.S. wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. He believed America was racially divided. Its democracy was weak. Its people lacked discipline to endure a long war. This ideological blindness led him to underestimate what the U.S. was about to become. The German High Command planned war around Hitler's fantasies, not reality. And those fantasies demanded a path across the ocean. If direct invasion was distant, economic strangulation was the immediate strategy. Admiral Karl Dönitz developed a concept: destroy American supply lines faster than they can be replaced. If American soldiers couldn't reach Europe and British cities starved, the Allies would collapse without Germany ever launching a single invasion ship. This required turning the Atlantic into a killing ground. U-boats operated in wolf packs, coordinated through encrypted Enigma messages. They stalked merchant convoys by night, fired spreads of torpedoes, and slipped beneath the waves before escorts could strike back. The results were devastating. Nearly 1,000 Allied ships sunk in the first half of 1942. Oil shortages on the U.S. East Coast. Industries briefly slowed due to material losses. Headlines warned, "Enemy at the gates of America." But the U-boat fleet had critical limitations: small crews and limited torpedo capacity, minimal anti-air defenses, increasing vulnerability to radar and sonar. What began as terror soon met resistance. America built convoys, air patrols, sonar nets, and the Black Pit. The mid-Atlantic zone shrank by the month. Still, each burning ship fed the fear that the ocean was no longer safe. And fear was a weapon Germany wielded expertly. Germany sought machines capable of forcing America into submission from afar. Engineers envisioned superweapons for long-range terror. V-1 flying bomb, capable of hitting London. V-2 rocket, first ballistic missile in history. Concept V-3 and V-5 extended-range shot systems. If these missiles could reach Britain, perhaps one day they could reach the US. In 1943, German scientists tested V-2 guidance improvements with the idea of extending range dramatically. Some proposals even imagined launching rockets from submerged U-boats near the American coast. Meanwhile, aircraft designers chased the Amerika bomber vision. Bomb New York. Force America into negotiation. Prove the Reich's global reach. Official Luftwaffe proposals mapped flight paths striking eastern cities, then landing in Spanish-held territory or attempting risky ocean returns. But the Reich lacked jet engines powerful enough, aluminum supplies large enough, fuel reserves deep enough, production lines stable enough. Technological ambition was limitless. Technological capability was not. Yet these projects kept alive a chilling question. If the war had lasted longer, would German weapons have eventually reached American skies? Inside Hitler's inner circle, strategies clashed. Grand Admiral Erich Raeder envisioned a future where Germany dominated global seas, but he warned repeatedly that this required long-term naval buildup, not war in 1939. He argued Germany would need multiple aircraft carriers, dozens of battleships, and a massive logistical fleet to ever threaten North America. Admiral Dönitz countered, submarines were the future. Why fight America head-on when you could starve it? Hermann Göring claimed the Luftwaffe alone could crush enemies, even across oceans, despite evidence showing Germany lacked long-range bombers. Meanwhile, Heinrich Himmler pushed for covert sabotage inside the US, terror through secret agents, and targeted destruction. Hitler embraced all ideas, but funded few fully. His impatience ruined planning. German leadership believed in victory everywhere. Southwest Russia, North Africa, Arctic convoys, the Atlantic, the Mediterranean. This created strategic schizophrenia. Resources were scattered, priorities changed weekly, engineers wasted time on Wunderwaffen while fundamentals, fuel, transport ships, naval escorts stayed weak. Even when some generals recognized America's rise, Hitler dismissed them. They build refrigerators and cars, not weapons. The failure to focus blinded the Reich. And as American productivity surged, German leadership drifted deeper into denial. Hitler believed the US lacked unity. He assumed racial and cultural divides would cause collapse once war demands increased. He failed to understand what happens when Americans feel threatened. Pearl Harbor ignited a transformation. Factories operated around the clock. Teenagers lied about their age to enlist. Women filled shipyards and aircraft plants. Celebrities toured to sell war bonds. Immigrants fought side by side in uniform. The nation's identity, democracy, freedom, opportunity, turned into a war cry. In early 1942, fear dominated headlines. By 1943, determination replaced fear. America's response astonished Germany. Convoy systems cut losses by half. Long-range aircraft, like the B-24, sealed the mid-ocean gap. Code-breaking breakthroughs crippled U-boat coordination. By mid-1943, U-boat crews called the Atlantic the Valley of Death. Hitler's misjudgment of American willpower doomed any chance of intimidation strategies, forcing surrender. Instead, every attack only strengthened American resolve. Even if Germany somehow defeated Britain, built hundreds of ships, and crossed an ocean, then what? Invading the continental United States meant fighting millions of armed civilians, subduing a continent-sized nation, sustaining enormous supply lines, occupying hostile territory for decades. To conquer America by land, Germany would have needed a force larger than what they deployed on the Eastern Front, where they already struggled to supply troops only a few hundred miles deep into Soviet territory. Furthermore, Canadian forces would reinforce from the north. Mexico would resist invasion from the south. The U.S. industrial centers inland, Detroit, Chicago, could not be easily destroyed. Logistically, politically, morally, a German invasion had no path to lasting success. But Hitler was not driven by logic. He was driven by ideology and fear of America's future power. Thus, he continued to push westward until history itself intervened. Because the tipping point, the moment Hitler's dream of striking America collapsed, was about to arrive. By mid-1943, the balance of power in the Atlantic began to shift violently against Germany. American shipyards were launching vessels faster than U-boats could sink them. Radar on patrol aircraft grew more precise. High-frequency direction finding exposed U-boat radio transmissions. Escort carriers, small aircraft carriers built specifically to guard convoys, filled the once deadly mid-ocean gap with protective aircraft. The wolf packs, once hunters, were becoming prey. Dönitz threw over 40 submarines against key Allied convoys. The result stunned the Kriegsmarine. 43 U-boats destroyed in a single month. Thousands of irreplaceable sailors lost. German submariners' life expectancy plunged below 90 days. Dönitz told Hitler a truth the Führer didn't want to hear. "We are losing the war in the Atlantic." Hitler refused to accept it. But numbers do not obey ideology. The Atlantic, the bridge Germany wanted to sever, was becoming an Allied highway. Every convoy that reached Britain carried tanks for North Africa, bombers for Europe, food for civilians, soldiers who would return fire. America's arsenal of democracy was crossing the ocean at full strength. On June 22, 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union, a move Hitler believed would be a quick victory. Instead, it became an endless drain. The Eastern Front consumed 70% of German manpower, almost all armored reserves, endless shipments of trucks, fuel, and ammunition. There was no longer any margin to expand westward. Germany could not defeat both a giant with endless industry and a giant with endless land. And both giants, the US and USSR, were now aligned against him. Desperation drove innovation. Peenemünde engineers advanced the V-2 rocket, the world's first ballistic missile. It could hit London from across the English Channel at supersonic speed. Some scientists proposed enlarging the rocket or launching a variant from modified U-boats to strike New York City. Had this succeeded, even a symbolic bombardment could have caused mass terror and political fury. But fuel shortages and Allied bombings slowed research. Factories lost skilled workers to the front lines. The Reich was running out of time. Every day, American strength increased. Every day, German strength declined. British and American codebreakers, led by cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park, cracked the Enigma naval cipher. U-boats suddenly found themselves ambushed by convoys that were no longer blind. What Germany saw as bad luck was actually Allied intelligence seeing everything. Even the ocean was no longer a shield. By late 1943, U-boats were ordered to avoid combat. Amerika bomber programs were shelved. Plan Z shipbuilding halted permanently. Sabotage operations mostly abandoned. The Reich was evacuating from the dream of America, not advancing toward it. Hitler publicly insisted victory was coming. Privately, he knew the truth. He had awakened an enemy he could never defeat. June 6, 1944, D-Day. The United States didn't just resist Germany. It invaded Europe. Thousands of American ships crossed the very ocean Germany had hoped to dominate. Tens of thousands of soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy. Instead of the swastika rising in New York, the stars and stripes began rising across Western Europe. German soldiers watched the horizon and saw only one thing. The ocean belonged to the Americans. The dream of reaching American shores didn't die quietly. It was crushed under the weight of Allied naval supremacy, American industry, and the relentless advance of millions of U.S. troops onto the continent Hitler once controlled. The war's center of gravity had shifted irreversibly. But the collapse of Germany's dreams wasn't yet complete. A final wave was coming, one that would seal forever the fate of Hitler's ambitions across the Atlantic. June 1942. Night. The coast of Amagansett, Long Island. Waves crash against the sand as a dark shape emerges from the sea. U-boat U-202. Hatches open. 4 men step onto American soil. Their boots leave deep prints in the wet sand. They are German agents, hand-picked, trained in explosives, disguise, underground sabotage. Their mission: blow up aluminum factories, destroy power plants feeding American industry, cripple rail networks moving weapons to Europe, spark fear and chaos across the United States. Each man carries civilian clothing, American cash, $175,000, timed bombs and incendiaries, false passports. The leader, George Dash, quickly buries crates in the dunes, but then disaster. A lone American Coast Guardsman, Seaman Cullen, walking his patrol, spots the men in the darkness. Dash panics. He pretends to be a fisherman. Cullen steps away, suspicious but unsure. The saboteurs vanish into the night. But their mission is already unraveling. Because Dash is losing faith, he believes the Nazis are doomed, and soon he will do the one thing Hitler never expected. He will betray the mission and every man on it. George Dash boards a train to New York City, not to join the others, but to turn himself in. He walks into the FBI headquarters and says 8 words that freeze the room. I am a German saboteur. And there are others. Agents think he's insane until he dumps $84,000 of Nazi cash onto the desk. Suddenly, the alarm bells scream. Across the East Coast, J. Edgar Hoover orders an urgent manhunt. Roadblocks, apartment raids, telephone taps. Every saboteur is tracked, cornered, arrested. Within 2 weeks, Hitler's entire invasion force is in US custody. But the truth is terrifying. They could have succeeded. They could have turned American industry into fire and rubble. They could have slowed the entire US war machine. President Franklin D. Roosevelt is furious, not relieved. He demands the harshest punishment possible. A secret trial is held inside the Department of Justice basement. No jury, no press. The results: 6 agents executed by electric chair. 2 imprisoned for decades. Their ashes scattered in an unmarked grave. The man who stopped Hitler's American sabotage becomes a traitor to both sides. Germany disowns him. America distrusts him. He spends the rest of his life as a ghost. But here, the chilling part. Hitler did not stop planning. He turned his attention away from sabotage and towards something far bigger, far darker. A weapon that could cross oceans and destroy cities without warning. By 1943, Germany's war on America had shifted from boots and saboteurs to machines of fear. Hitler understood a direct invasion was impossible. The Atlantic was controlled by the Allies. Thousands of miles of ocean, combined with US industrial output, made any amphibious assault suicidal. But rockets could cross the ocean, at least in theory. The V-2 ballistic missile, already raining terror on London, inspired German engineers to dream bigger. Could a modified rocket reach New York City, Boston, Washington, D.C.? Peenemünde, the birthplace of the V-2, became a hub of audacious plans. Engineers sketched enormous launch platforms on the coasts of occupied Norway and Greenland, imagining strikes that would terrify the American population. Calculations were made. Rocket velocity, 3,500 km/h. Range, up to 3,200 km in theory. Payload, 1,000 kg of explosives. One report suggested targeting Manhattan's financial district, the heart of American economic power. But reality always intruded. Fuel supplies were scarce. Allied bombings destroyed production plants. Skilled technicians were drafted to the Eastern Front. Coastal launch sites risked immediate discovery. Despite these obstacles, Hitler approved plans for Project Amerika, a symbolic strike designed to show the United States that no landmass was safe from the Reich. Meanwhile, Allied intelligence monitored suspicious shipments and unexplained rocket tests in Norway. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and British intelligence coordinated to locate every potential launch site. By late 1944, German scientists were building prototypes. Some even proposed mounting rockets on U-boats stationed off Newfoundland, a platform that could deliver the missile without setting foot on American soil. But the Atlantic, once Germany's dream bridge, remained a deadly moat. U-boats were hunted relentlessly. Allied air patrols, radar, and code breaking meant no vessel could approach undetected. Even if a rocket had launched, the logistical chain, transport, guidance systems, fuel made success unlikely. Yet Hitler's obsession illustrates how dangerously close Germany came to touching the American homeland. Submarine raids were already devastating. Sabotage agents landed on US soil. Plans for rockets capable of striking New York were actively discussed. The Atlantic was no longer merely a barrier. It was a battleground of ideas, machines, and ambition. By 1945, the V-2 project would terrorize Europe, but the dream of hitting America remained unrealized. Logistics, geography, and Allied mastery of the oceans made any real threat impossible. Still, the fact that Hitler contemplated New York as a target marks one of history's closest brushes with global catastrophe. And with the failure of rockets, invasion plans, and sabotage, the final collapse of Hitler's transatlantic ambitions becomes inevitable. A story of strategy, technology, and hubris converging in a single, doomed vision. By 1945, it was undeniable. Hitler would never set foot on American soil. His dreams of transatlantic conquest were dead. The U-boat wolf packs that once prowled the East Coast were destroyed, the saboteurs caught or neutralized, and the ambitious rocket programs confined to European terror campaigns. But the impact of these near misses was profound. The attacks on shipping and attempted sabotage forced the United States to mobilize fully. The once isolationist nation transformed into a global military powerhouse. Liberty ships rolled off assembly lines at unprecedented rates, a ship every 14 days on average. Aircraft production surged from 3,000 in 1941 to over 85,000 by 1943. Millions of Americans enlisted, trained, and deployed in theaters across the globe. The fear of direct attack accelerated technological development. Radar networks along the coast were extended, sonar detection improved, and early warning systems were integrated into daily life. Civil defense drills, blackout regulations, and coastal fortifications became standard. President Franklin D. Roosevelt reflected the national mood. We must prepare for anything and make certain the homeland is secure. Every German submarine sunk and every saboteur arrested reinforced a new American belief: their homeland could not be taken lightly. Hitler's failure to project power across the Atlantic exemplified the limitations of German military planning. Naval weakness. Without a fleet capable of sustaining transatlantic operations, any invasion force would have been annihilated long before reaching American shores. Resource drain. Factories, fuel, and manpower were already overcommitted to the Eastern Front and North Africa. Technological hurdles. Rockets, long-range bombers, and other superweapons were never operational at the scale necessary for an American strike. Admirals, generals, and scientists inside the Reich recognized these limitations, but Hitler's ideological obsession blinded him to reality. His orders demanded audacity over feasibility, ambition over strategy. Even failed threats left marks. The drumbeat campaign against U.S. shipping created widespread fear. Merchant crews armed themselves, insurance rates soared, coastal communities prepared for invasion. The knowledge that Germany had considered hitting New York, Boston, or Washington, D.C. gave Americans a sense of shared vulnerability that united them politically and socially. Ironically, Hitler's near misses strengthened the very nation he sought to intimidate. American military planners analyzed every German failure. U-boat tactics, sabotage methods, and proposed rocket strikes informed. Convoy protection protocols, coastal surveillance networks, emergency response strategies for civilian populations. The United States did not simply survive the German threat. It learned from it, gaining experience that would influence post-war defense planning, including early Cold War strategies. By the end of 1945, the world recognized that Germany's reach had limits, even under Hitler. His obsession with the United States, while terrifying on paper, revealed the stark contrast between imagination and capability. Germany could occupy Paris, Berlin, or Warsaw. It could bombard London from the skies. It could infiltrate American coasts with a handful of agents. But a full-scale invasion, a strike across the Atlantic, it was impossible. And yet the shadow of what might have been lingered, shaping military doctrine, public perception, and the psychology of war. The Atlantic had defended America. Logistics, geography, and industrial strength proved greater than ideology and ambition. Hitler's dreams of conquest ended not in the streets of New York, but in the icy waves of the ocean he could never fully command. Allied planners studied Germany's mistakes extensively. The near miss with Amerika influenced post-war defense thinking. Cold War preparation. The United States built coastal radar lines and early warning systems anticipating long-range strikes, a precursor to the DW line in the Arctic. Naval strategy. The U.S. Navy prioritized carrier groups and anti-submarine warfare, ensuring no adversary could ever threaten the mainland by sea. Missile defense. The concept of rockets and long-range missiles originating in Europe or distant territories spurred early research into missile tracking and interception. Military academies in Washington and London still cited the U-boat campaigns and sabotage attempts as case studies in deterrence, homeland security, and the limits of power projection. Even failed threats shaped perception. American newspapers chronicled U-boat attacks along the East Coast, calling them Nazi night raids. The Pastorius saboteur trial became both a cautionary tale and a rallying point. Schoolchildren read about it, families memorized maps of the landing sites. German propaganda, meanwhile, glorified bravery and ambition, but could not obscure operational failure. Internally, Hitler's obsession with Amerika was known to few, but inspired fear among planners who understood the audacity of his vision. The narrative of what might have been Hitler stepping onto U.S. soil became part of the mythology of World War II, blending fact with fear in American collective memory. History often measures wars by battles won or lost, cities captured or destroyed, but some of the most profound stories lie in what never happened. Hitler's vision of invading the United States is one of those stories, a near miss that tested imagination, ambition, and human resolve. For a brief moment, the Reich believed the Atlantic could be crossed. U-boats prowled the American coast. Saboteurs landed on Long Island. Rockets were drawn on maps aimed at Manhattan. And yet, reality intervened. Geography, industrial might, logistics, and sheer human determination rendered the dream impossible. Amerika, once asleep to the threat, awoke in the nick of time. Factories roared to life. Soldiers trained, ships patrolled, coastlines were fortified. The nation became what Hitler feared most, unified, resilient, and unstoppable. The threat that once inspired terror instead forged strength. Hitler's ambition teaches a broader lesson about the limits of power. Ideology, intent, and technology can inspire audacity, but they cannot override the immutable laws of distance, supply, and scale. The Atlantic was more than water. It was a guardian, a reminder that some natural barriers can alter the course of history as profoundly as any army. Yet the closeness of the threat lingers in memory. It reminds us how fragile peace can be, how rapidly ambition can reach beyond reason, and how even the most distant shores can become battlegrounds in the mind of a tyrant. It also illustrates humanity's capacity to respond, to innovate, to organize, and to protect what is cherished. Hitler never set foot on American soil. His rockets never flew across the Atlantic. His saboteurs failed. But the shadow of his ambition changed the course of World War II, shaped post-war defense, and taught generations the weight of vigilance. In the end, the story is not only about what might have been. It is about the triumph of preparation over ideology, of resolve over fear, and of human ingenuity over the nightmares of ambition. The United States remained unconquered, and in that victory, the world glimpsed both the danger of hubris and the enduring power of resilience.